Sup y'all, Winnie here, and it's time to finally find out what the Horus Heresy did to the Blood Angels. I've been kinda itching to find out what was up with this, but last week instead of doing Warhammer stuff on Monday, I did Frog Fractions for April Fool's reasons. And rather than wait an additional week for this, I'm doing it now. So, Cygnus campaign. Just as it seemed that the Emperor's dream could be fulfilled, the Great Crusade ended in the most terrible and unimaginable way. It came to pass that the Imperial Warmaster Horus, the greatest of the Emperor's genetic sons, fell to the temptations of the Chaos Gods and became swayed by their promises of power. He naturally sought to sway his brother Primarchs to his cause. The Imperial cult devotional portrait of the Primarch Sanguinius. Horus and Sanguinius had fought many campaigns by each other's side. Their relationship was so close that it even incited jealousy among their brother Primarchs on occasion. But in his now black heart, Horus knew that Sanguinius would never willingly betray their father, and so he had formulated an audacious plan to either convert the Blood Angels Legion to his cause or utterly destroy them. To this end, Horus had discovered Solar decades earlier a carefully guarded secret of the Blood Angels when he fought alongside Sanguinius' Ninth Legion in a genocidal campaign on the world of Melchior. Horus had come upon his brother Primarch in a sunken ruin of an alien chapel and had witnessed the unthinkable. Sanguinius murdering one of his own Astartes. Sanguinius explained his actions to his bewildered brother. He had discovered that within his own genome there was a trait that lay buried and waiting to be awakened. This genetic flaw would later be known as the Red Thirst. Sanguinius had been aware of the flaw in his genome for several years, keeping the truth from the Emperor and his fellow Primarchs. Some of the Angel Sons had learned a measure of the truth, but only as Kalion, First Captain Ralderon, the Ninth Legion's Master Apothecary who remained on the Legion homeworld of Baal, and a few others were fully aware of the extent of this affliction. They reunited with Sanguinius in finding a way to repair this flaw, always referred to as the Flaw. Horus swore to his brother that he would never speak of this matter to anyone, even their father, and he would keep this promise for as long as Sanguinius wished him to. The angel was touched by his brother's gesture and expressed his gratitude. Horus solemnly vowed to help Sanguinius deal with the matter, however long it took. Little did they know at the time that one day a corrupted Horus would take full advantage of this knowledge and attempt to turn the Blood Angel's flaw against them. Da da da! Sanguinius betrayed. Let's see. Sanguinius leads his Blood Angels against Ka-Bandaha and his Legion of Daemons. Decades later, Horus exploited this knowledge of the Blood Angel's genetic deficiency. The War Master believed he had found a way to sway his beloved brother's legion to his cause and the service of the Chaos Gods. In his capacity as Imperial War Master, Horus ordered Sanguinius to gather his entire legion and make for the Cygnus Cluster, a triple-star system located in the Ultima Segmentum near the eastern fringe. Sanguinius' Ninth Legion was to cleanse the 7 worlds and 15 moons that comprise the Cygnus Cluster of Xenos invaders known as the Nephilim, and release the humans settled there from their Xenos overlords in what would later be known to history as the Cygnus Campaign. To further entice Sanguinius, the War Master informed him that he had found the means by which the Blood Angels would be able to excise the darkness from within their souls and rid themselves of the flaw. If Sanguinius obeyed the War Master's command in this matter, then Horus promised him that the Blood Angels would find a new freedom. Sanguinius had no reason to doubt Horus, for they were as close as two brothers could be. Many of their fellow Primarchs were even jealous of the closeness between the pair. I don't know how many times y'all feel like you need to say that. Sanguinius relished the opportunity to once again prove the value of their bond, unaware of the War Master's perfidy. Sanguinius willingly obeyed his brother Primarch and immediately set out for this volatile region of space. Unbeknownst to the Blood Angels, they were blindly walking into a deadly trap, for the Cygnus Cluster had fallen prey to the agents of the ruinous powers, and become a veritable realm of chaos in real space, a system of hellish daemon worlds under the rule of a greater demon of Slaanesh, known as Kiris the Perverse. When the Blood Angels arrived in system, their fleet was ambushed by the malevolent demonic forces of the Warp, crippling or killing many of their navigators and astropaths in the initial onslaught. The Blood Angels now faced the true fury of chaos for the first time. Kiris sent an image of himself to Sanguinius, declaring his lordship over the system in the name of Slaanesh and taunting the Primarch into taking it back from him. Though they had never faced such a foe, the Blood Angels prepared their counterattack, sure that they would prevail. Rising to the challenge of the vile Greater Daemon, the Blood Angels Legion attacked the demon host of Kyrus, launching a series of attacks across the seat of the daemon's power, the world of Cygnus Prime. And this picture here says, Primarch Sanguinius fights the bloodthirster Kabanda on the daemon world of Cygnus Prime. The Black Rage. During the battle, Sanguinius came face to face with a new nightmare known as Kabanda, a greater daemon of Khorne. During the battle that ensued, Sanguinius was sorely wounded and temporarily incapacitated. He witnessed Kabanda slaughter 500 of his sons with a single blow of his mighty axe. The psychic backlash of the deaths of so many of his sons blasted Sanguinius into unconsciousness. With the fall of their Primarch and the slaughtering of their brethren, the Blood Angels' Legion was consumed by a black rage that drove them into a berserker's fury as they charged into the demonic horde, and in their madness they smashed the horde of demons asunder. Yet, the brutal violence of the daemon Kabanda had unleashed something dark within the psyche of the Space Marines. A thirst for blood and violence that would not be slaked until every taint of chaos had been erased from the planet. At the same time, the Blood Angels' librarians violated the edicts of the Council of Nicaea and used their abilities to heal and revive their Primarch. Once Sanguinius awoke, he assaulted Kabanda and defeated the Bloodthirster. Even the mighty Kyrus was banished back to the Materium by Sanguinius. Only when the planet was fully cleansed did the rage of the Blood Angels finally subside. Though Cygnus had been freed from the thrall to the forces of chaos, the cost of victory was far higher than any could have wished. The strange berserker rage the Blood Angels had experienced had left a brooding shadow on their souls that would manifest in the centuries to come as the Great Curse, later known as the Black Rage, that would afflict the Blood Angels and their later successors. Arrival in the 500 Worlds. Following the end of this long, grueling campaign, the Blood Angels attempted a warp jump towards the Throne World. Despite the impassable torrential ruin storm that had been conjured by the word bearers during the Battle of Calth, the fleet's navigators were able to pinpoint a shining beacon, which they initially assumed was the Astronomicon. Desperate, the Knight's fleet navigators followed it. Sensing safe harbor, the fleet immediately executed a warp translation back into real space. When they finally exited the warp, they found themselves hundreds of light years off course, nowhere near their targeted destination. It was by no accident that the Blood Angels had arrived at the current unknown destination, as Sanguinius had ordered his navigators to strike for the strongest telepathic signal. They had inadvertently detected the shining beacon of the alien artifact known as the Pharos, on the distant world of Sotha? Unknowingly, the Blood Angels had traveled clear across the galaxy and ended up in the realms of Ultramar. Soon they were approached by a skirmish line of unidentified starships. They were hailed by the bright cobalt blue vessels trimmed with white and shining gold. The Blood Angels were greeted by the masters of the 13th Legion himself, Rabute Guilliman. I swear I heard his name said out loud once and cannot remember how it was pronounced, who welcomed his brother Primarch to the 500 Worlds of Ultramar, Imperium Secundus and the Trial of the Night Haunter. Ultramarines Primarch Guilliman declares a reluctant Sanguinius the rightful ruler of Imperium Secundus. With the Imperium severed in two halves, isolated and ignorant of each other as a result of the raging tumult of the Ruin Storm, the light of the Astronomicon was no longer visible from Ultramar, and no word of the Emperor had been heard for several Terran years. Ultramarines Primarch Guilliman declared the foundation of the Imperium Secundus as a means of continuing the fight against the traitors and securing the Emperor's great work. When the Blood Angels arrived in Ultramar, having escaped the Cygnus cluster, Guilliman proclaimed Sanguinius as the rightful heir to the Emperor. Not long after, the Dark Angels also followed the guiding beacon of the Pharos and arrived in the 500 Worlds. Lionel Johnson was declared the Lord Protector of the Realm and Supreme Master of all its military forces, a title equivalent to that of War Master. Unfortunately, the foundation of Imperium Secundus was marred when Night Lords Primarch Conrad Kurz, I feel like that's supposed to be Cruz? I don't know, who had been hiding within the bowels of the Dark Angel's flagship, escaped from the Invincible Reason and rampaged across Macragge, intent on spreading as much terror and chaos as he could. Eventually, both Guilliman and the Lion confronted the cornered Kurz. Their attempt to kill him were unsuccessful as the Night Lord's Primarch had laid a cunning trap. He brought down an entire chapel upon the two Primarchs through the use of planted explosives and fled the scene. Guilliman and the Lion were only saved through the direct intervention of the loyalist Iron Warrior's warsmith Barabbas Danteok, who was communicating with Guilliman at the time of the attack, through a portal that was opened by the Pharos. On instinct, the Warsmith reached through the portal and pulled the two Primarchs to safety on Sotha. Continuing his obsessive hunt for the elusive Night Haunter over the following 2 years, the Lion and Guilliman continuously clashed over policies, especially in regards to the security of the Imperium Secundus and how best to deal with rebels on Macragge, that the Lion was certain Kurzet has something to do with. Following a suicide bombing on Astartes convoy, the Lion used the First Legion to establish martial law on Macragge. Certain that Kurz was hiding within the rebellious Illyrium region, the Lion advocated the use of a massive orbital saturation bombardment of the region to ensure Kurz's death. Facing resistance from both Emperor Sanguinius and Guilliman, the Lion instead opted to deploy his legions, Dreadwing, in order to flush out Kurz and the rebels. During an attack on the city of Al-Mamons, the Lion finally cornered the elusive Night Lord's Primarch and the two came to blows. After a brutal confrontation, the Lion eventually emerged victorious and questioned his brother why he had turned away from the Emperor, to which Kurz simply replied, "Why not?" Kurz went on to explain that there was a monster in his head that he could not stop. Though he had finally had Kurz at his mercy, the Lion couldn't bring himself to kill his brother, and instead pummeled him again. The Lion ripped Kurz's backpack from his battle plate and lifted him over his head, and then brutally brought him down across his knee, breaking Kurz's spine and paralyzing him. The Lion brought the grievously wounded Kurz before Sanguinius and Guilliman to stand trial. Well, stand trial. A triumvirate was later held, where Kurz defended his actions but refused to admit his guilt. Since each of the Primarchs had been created to perform a specific function, Kurz was merely acting according to his own nature and therefore had committed no crimes. The Night Lord's Primarch then further divided Guilliman and the Lion by accusing the latter of secretly ordering orbital bombardment in direct violation of Guilliman's orders. Enraged, the Lion sought to kill Kurz but was halted by the words of Sanguinius, and Guilliman snatched El'Janssen's lion's sword and broke the blade across its armored thigh. El'Janssen was furious, but Sanguinius dismissed the Lord Protector, ending the triumvirate. The Lion was next banished from the Imperium Secundus. Taking his leave, the Lion and the Dark Angels withdrew from Macragge only hours later. Standing in the chamber of the T'Cholcha engine aboard the Invincible Reason, the Lion brooded over recent events and questioned his actions over the course of the previous solar decades and many of the decisions he had come to regret. As the Dark Angels made their final preparations to depart back to Caliban, the Lion went back to the T'Cholcha engine chamber. He then ordered the device to teleport himself and Holguin, Deathbringer, the voted lieutenant of the Deathwing, back to Macragge. As Sanguinius was preparing to execute Kurz for his crimes, both the Lion and his lieutenant teleported directly into the chamber and told Sanguinius to halt the execution. As troops entered the room demanding the Lion to surrender, El'Janssen explained his reasons for the intrusion. He reasoned that Kurz had the ability to see precognitive visions of potential futures, and repeated the Night Haunter's claim that his death would one day come at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor. If this was true, the Lion reasoned, then it was proof that the Emperor was still alive. Sanguinius knew the Lion's explanation rang true, as he recognized that his own precognitive visions of his inevitable death at the hands of the War Master would also eventually come to pass. When Guilliman demanded to know what would become of Kurz, the Nine knelt before his two brothers and promised that he would be Kurz's jailer. The Age of Darkness. The Blood Angels' Legion stands triumphant at the Imperial Palace after the Siege of Terra. If the Great Crusade was mankind's finest hour, then the Horus Heresy was surely its blackest. Brother fought brother with the quarter neither offered nor given. Heroes were slain, worlds burned, and the Emperor's dreams of peace were shattered forever. In the midst of this darkness, the Blood Angels never wavered, but held true at the Emperor's side. Sanguinius now stepped into the void left by Horus's desertion, assuming command of the Emperor's loyal forces. In doing so, he thrust the Blood Angels into the brutal forefront of the fighting. The rivalry with the World Eaters now escalated into bitter enmity as the two legions found themselves serving different masters, and their confrontations were to be amongst the bloodiest and hardest fought of that bloodiest of wars. It is said that Horus hated and feared Sanguinius more than any of his brothers, and wove many strategies to ensnare or slay him, though all failed. An Imperial cult devotional portrait of the death of Sanguinius at the treacherous hands of his former brother Horus, okay. Siege of Terra. For all the might of the Emperor, for every effort of Sanguinius and the remaining loyalist Primarchs, the forces of Horus drove all before them. In too short a time, the Emperor of Mankind was assailed within his great Imperial palace on Terra. Fortunately for the Loyalist forces, the Blood Angels were present for the titanic final battle of the Horus Heresy, the Siege of Terra. The Blood Angels' imperial fists and white scars defended the imperial palace with zealous fervor. Sanguinius himself led the defense of the outer walls. 3 times the War Master's troops gained footholds on the walls, and 3 times they were driven back by Sanguinius and his Blood Angels. When the wall was broken by attacks from Chaos Titans, Sanguinius organized the retreat to the inner palace. At the Eternity Gate, the entrance to the Emperor's throne room, Sanguinius defied the Chaos Horde long enough to buy time for the Loyalist wounded to be carried inside. As the last were carried in, Sanguinius went to return to the palace. Before the Eternity Gate could shut, Kabanda, Archdemon of Khorne and Lord of all the Bloodthirsters, attacked the Primarch. The Angel and Greater Demon fought in the air over the Imperial Palace, but Sanguinius, weary and taken by surprise, was cast down. Kabanda hovered in the air, laughing gutturally at his opponent's despair. Sanguinius, however, was not dead. Sanguinius regained his senses and took to the air. Flying as swift as a missile, the Primarch seized the demon's ankle and lifted it high into the air. Before the demon could bellow its fury, Sanguinius broke its back over his knee. He hurled the carcass back down at the Chaos Horde, who howled in fury. The Eternity Gate was closed. With the imminent arrival of the Space Wolves, Dark Angels, and Ultramarines legions forced Horus to gamble on it, forcing a final battle with the Emperor by dropping the Void Shields protecting his battle barge. The Vengeful Spirit, Sanguinius, Rogaldorn of the Imperial Fist, and the Legio Custodes joined the Emperor in a daring teleport assault upon the vessel. The chaotic sorcery protecting the ship scattered the Loyalist strike force throughout the vessel after they teleported. Only Space Marines could have withstood the horrors of that demon-haunted starship, and even they were sorely pressed. Sanguinius was swiftly separated from his comrades, and, so the legend tells, was brought through artifice before the treacherous Horus. As Sanguinius possessed the psychic ability of foresight, it seems almost certain that he knew he was going to his death. It remains unknown whether fatalism or loyalty brought Sanguinius aboard. The Blood Angels themselves have no doubt on the matter. The 2 Primarchs and former brothers finally met on the command deck. In evil cunning, Horus offered Sanguinius a position of power if he would renounce his loyalty to the Emperor, and Sanguinius refused. Thus rejected, Horus flew into a rage and attacked. Even at the peak of his power, Sanguinius could not have hoped to prevail against the monster Horus had become, and the Primarch was weary and wounded from his travails on Terra. Despite his grievous wounds, Sanguinius managed to match Horus's martial prowess, even at the height of his demonic power, and Horus was forced to deal with the angel by psychic methods. In his limitless malice, Horus made sure that Sanguinius' death was the most painful and foul that the boundless evils in his service could administer. The War Master's psychic assault was so powerful, it echoed down through the generations of Sanguinius' sons who are haunted by its echo within their souls to this day. When the Emperor at last entered Horus' sanctum, he found his rebellious War Master standing above Sanguinius' broken, bleeding corpse. In the battle that followed, Horus was finally vanquished, though the Emperor too was cast down near to death. There are many tales told of this final battle, and, though the exact facts are long lost, one detail holds through all the recitations through all the millennia since. Despite the Emperor's great power, he could never have bested Horus had not the blade of Sanguinius wrought a chink in the War Master's armor, and because of this, the Blood Angels claim to be the greatest of all the Primarchs. Brothers in Blood. Rebute Guilliman, Guilliman the Tactician, Guilliman the Warrior. History will remember the Primarch of the Ultramarines by many titles. To us, of the Blood, he will have only one, Guilliman the Butcher. With law and edict, Guilliman ripped the heart from the legions. Even his own sons were not spared his treachery. Where Horus had sought to use a hammer blow, Guilliman used a duelist blade. In the end, the result was the same. Brother became cousin, cousin became exile. Guilliman's new chapter, his new beginning, was a sundering to all that had come before. Stripped of honor and tithe, of history and deed, we were all of us undone. Bastards of war and victory, we were angels no more. Flesh Terror's chapter, Master Nasir Amit. The Imperium was forever changed in the wake of Horus's defeat. No longer would the beneficent emperor take a martial role in mankind's defense, for his shattered body was now sustained only by the life-giving machineries of the Golden Throne. The reconstruction of his empire and the final rout of the traitor forces would now fall to the surviving Primarchs, men such as Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists and Guilliman of the Ultramarines. Indeed, it was Guilliman who would have the greatest lasting effect upon the now leaderless Blood Angels. Through the Codex Astartes, the great treatise on the restructuring and ordering of the Space Marines, Guilliman's legacy would reshape the Blood Angels legions into the chapters that defend the Imperium to this day. Guilliman sought to ensure no man could ever command the destructive power of a Space Marine legion again. To do this, he insisted that the Legiones Astartes be divided into smaller 1,000-man autonomous units. Some of his surviving brothers rallied against this dissolution as a perceived injustice and a slight against the integrity of their legions. At a time when emotions were running high and weary souls saw treachery and judgment in every remark, this edict threatened to cause a new imperial civil war. In the end, though, Guilliman could not be denied, and one by one his surviving brothers and the leaderless legions relented. The Legiones Astartes was no more. The chapters of the Adeptus Astartes were born. For the Blood Angels, this division was a cruel double blow. Their Primarch, Sanguinius, was dead, slain at Horus's own hands in the final moments of the heresy, and now, without the time to grieve their father nor recoup the terrible casualties suffered in the Siege of Terra, this close-knit fraternity was to be sundered. The survivors lacked an obvious leader, and worse still, the first signs of their fall were beginning to manifest within the ranks of the Legion. It is fair to say that the Blood Angels' encounters with the Scions of Chaos had left the legionaries scarred, and the horror of their master's death was a visceral wound upon their souls. Since fighting against the demons of Khorne and Slaanesh at Cygnus Prime, a nascent thirst had awoken within the Legion, and the aftershock of Sanguinius' death at the hands of the War Master had cursed their souls with what would come to be known as the Black Rage. Though the heresy was over, for the Blood Angels their greatest trial was just beginning. From the midst of this sorrow and tragedy arose the chapters of this new birth referred to as the Second Founding. While each legion worked out for itself how to divide, and some legions experienced a more harrowing road than even the Blood Angels, the Sons of Sanguinius were at last united by the sole survivor of the Sanguinary Guard, as Kellyn. Accounts from this time differ greatly, but all concur that as Kellyn's council, the survivors of the Legion formed a small number of chapters, commanded by the champions of the Blood Angels. Each took on the traditions and rites of their legion as the basis for their new brotherhood and adopted a fitting name. Thus began a time of rebuilding for the Sons of Sanguinius, who separated to establish themselves as autonomous organizations. Notably, even in this time of disarray, the vengeful chapter master Nasir Amit, known by his peers as the Flesh Terror, led his eponymous chapter on a blood-soaked crusade to seek out and annihilate any vestige of the traitor legions. Their actions, even in the early years of the Flesh Terror's existence, laid the foundations upon which they would be known and judged ever after. In the thousands of Terran years that have followed, there have been several subsequent foundings of Space Marine chapters, and through these, the number of chapters raised from the gene stock of the Blood Angels has also risen. Each newly forged chapter helps to cement the legacy of their Primarch Sanguinius, ensuring it lives on as long as they fight. But as time has passed, it is clear that, though all of these chapters started their life from the same legion, they have all diverged from their founding legion to some greater or lesser degree. Some, such as the Angels in Carmine, have established a reputation beyond reproach and a legacy of heroism every bit as honorable as their founding legion. Others, however, are barely recognizable. Indeed, the Carmine Blades are a chapter who passed, perhaps accidentally, as descendants of the Ultramarine Legion for a considerable time, until a chance meeting with Astaroth the Grim in the late 41st millennium revealed the truth behind their origins. The Carmine Blades had at last an answer for the strange symptoms they had worked so hard to conceal from those around them. They now had a name for the red thirst and black rage that they had hitherto been unable to explain. Recent history, the 41st millennium. How far does this go? It might be in my best interest to stop at the recent history, so that it won't get over long, and also, it seems to be a good stopping point. It's big letters instead of little letters. So, I'm going to call this episode here. We now know what Horus did to the Blood Angels. We now know that he just brutalized the crap out of Sanguinius, and Sanguinius, who could see the future, knew it was coming, but just kind of went with it. I guess he's like one of the very few fictional people who could see the future and did not try to change it. Because if Greek mythology has taught me anything, it's that you should just kind of ignore oracles. Because if you try to defy the oracle, you're going to make it happen. So you shouldn't even really go to the oracles at all, to be honest. You should just live your life and go about your business. And as for the oracles, maybe they should just keep that shit to themselves. But that's going to do it for this episode. If you liked it, a like and a subscribe would be groovy. If you want to click the bell, that'll give you notifications for the next upload. And I will see y'all in the next one. Later.